Welcome to Executive Access, created for motivated professionals. This is your home for real talk with executives about their career journeys, leadership practices, successes, and learnings along the way. I am your host, Jamie Tazi. Today, I'm sitting down with Elizabeth Burwell, Senior Vice President and Team Leader at Southern First Bank in Charleston, South Carolina. Regular listeners of Executive Access have heard me talk a lot about strength and warmth and how the combination of those two are so powerful when they show up at the same time. And Elizabeth is the poster child for strength and warmth. And I'm so excited for you to see a real example in action. She talks about why direct communication is so important, especially when it's hard, and how raising your hand to take on new things is more important than you may realize. I learn something new every time I talk with Elizabeth. She is a no-nonsense, get stuff done kind of leader, but you may be surprised about where she says her sense of leadership comes from. Let's dive in. Welcome, Elizabeth Burwell, to the Executive Access. I'm so thrilled that you're here. You are the Senior Vice President and Team Leader at Southern First Bank. Prior to that, you were SVP and the Charleston Market President for FNB Corporation. Prior to that, 15 years experience as a Vice President at Wells Fargo. So you are like Miss Banking, I think so.
A lot of years banking.
Yeah. A lot. So welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. You're also the chair-elect for the Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce, which we'll get into in a little bit. So you're highly respected in the business community. And so kudos to you for all of that. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I was flattered that you asked and honored to be here.
I think you and I have been in like the mutual fan club ever since we met each other a few years ago.
Girl crush.
It's like, you're awesome. No, you're awesome. No, you're great. No, you're great. Which I think, by the way, for women, for men, for everybody, that's how it should be more and more. A little encouragement goes a long way. So, well, I thought I would start with the old growth mindset question. What are you up to these days to continue to grow either professionally or personally?
Yeah, never a dull moment. Well, thank you for having me. I love the growth mindset question. I think I would like to believe that I'm a forever learner, right? I love to try and learn new things, but growth has seemed to have taken a front seat in the last 12 to 18 months. So I'll hit on professionally. I made a big move almost a year ago, September 23, and joined the Southern First Bank team. And the interesting thing about that, really from a professional growth standpoint, is the opportunity to work with the president and founder and CEO on running the bank, on the 30,000-foot view, which is a really different opportunity than I've had at the previous organizations where I've worked. So being able to be involved with the way the sausage is made is a great learning experience for me.
Great.
On the professional side. And then on the personal side, as you and I share the 3-boy club, and as they grow, it leaves me recognizing that I'm constantly needing to grow and change. And so the last year has really been about, I would say, personal development around what are the next goals for our life, right? I've gotten educated, I've gotten married, I have my children, building a career that I'm proud of. The next step looks like vitality and mobility and being able to stay present for the next 50 plus years. So I recently added yoga back to my exercise repertoire,
Nice.
Which has been a huge win and something I'm really striving to be better at. And then also just personal, I would say health, investing in my personal health and well-being.
So true. Like you and I have talked a lot about longevity and health and wellness, something that I took for granted, say in my 20s and early 30s. And it's so funny, like how you can start to see a new horizon with my kids getting older. I can picture myself. I mean, hopefully I have a long time to get there, but it's all about like one day I want to be able to be on the floor, playing with my grandkids or not having anything, slowing anybody down when we go on vacation, hopefully together. I mean, I'm making a lot of assumptions that my kids are going to want a vacation with me.
100%.
But yeah, I think that's great. So health, longevity, and just a new floor that you're on. I talk about leadership in floors and a new view at the bank, which is fantastic.
What that looks like at 47 is different than it looked at 37 or 27. So.
Exactly. That's called wisdom, I think.
Of the ages.
Of the ages. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk to you about, and listeners that have been through a lot of these podcasts may have heard me talk about this topic before. I like to see, when I see something that's amazing, I want to try to talk to the person, you in this case, about reverse engineering how you get there. And one of the things that is so amazing about your leadership, so for our listeners, Elizabeth and I really got to know each other. We were on the same board together at Porter Gout School, and Elizabeth, I'm sure you'll be shocked to know she leads up the finance committee with all of her finance background. But I saw her lead, and you exhibit this strength and warmth, I call it, right? This amazing balance of kind of coming across so strong and badass, is a word that we use together. That might be the first time I've cursed on this podcast. This is a new level for me. So strong and also warm at the same time. Like the strength creates clarity for other people. Like, here's where we need to go. And everybody's like, great, strong followership. The warmth keeps the door open for people to share their ideas. And I'm just curious, do you know you come across that way? And if so, are you intentional about that?
Well, it's a great question, and you and I have talked about it before. And I don't know if I knew I came across that way until we talked about it. It resonates, and I can appreciate the value of it. And now I'm intentional about it. I guess would be my honest answer there. I think that. One of the things that when we were talking in prep for the podcast that you asked me was, has it always been that way? And if I'm honest, I would have to say, I have always been bubbly and talkative, and I genuinely enjoy people. I like meeting new people. I like talking to people. I like hearing about what they're interested in. I like the energy that other people bring. So the warmth piece from that perspective just comes very naturally. The strength piece, I'm proud of. I think that probably is also natural, but the ability, I had to hone that some.
Okay. Like from when you were early in career to where you are now?
Yes. And even, as an adolescent, right, with my parents. Strong-willed, I think that both of my parents would say strong-willed is an excellent description. Passionate and, driven, but really learning how not to push people away with that kind of, intense personality, and how to use it for good. So I was blessed that the warmth was a good balance naturally. And I do think that now that I've been leading for, or working with teams for 25 years and leading for 10 plus at this point, people really do need warmth in the workplace. And I think for a lot of years, we didn't think those two things could exist together. And I'm committed to demonstrating that they absolutely can. Not only can they live together, that they really are mutually beneficial for the best case scenario. So.
Well, in what ways do you think they're mutually beneficial? So when you can get that right balance of strength and warmth, like what are the outcomes that you see you're able to get?
Sure. Well, I think you hit on it, the nail on the head. The warmth create genuine relationships with your team, right? If they can really come to me without fear of being chastised, if they believe I'm going to be in their corner, they come with ideas. They come with possibilities that they might be otherwise scared to put out there. They share what they're struggling with, which gives you a real opportunity to coach. And I think when they feel loved and accepted, then they also buy in to what we're trying to build. And I often say there's a difference in managing and leading. I really enjoy the process of leading. I'm happy to be the leader. Now, there are times that you have to manage as well. But what really resonates with me, what I'm really passionate about is leading, where indicated, a group of people who are all pulling for the same thing. So I think the warmth allows you to build real relationships, and you've got to have the balance of the strength, the credibility that is built through genuine, honest conversations, especially when they're difficult, is really irreplaceable. But I feel like if your team members trust that you care about them for who they are, you have a much better platform for the more difficult conversations. And if you're pulling from both of those things, your outcomes are, infinite. I mean,
I feel like people will run through walls for leaders that they believe have their back, is what I'm hearing, which is,
100%.
If a leader's job is to get the best out of people. But you used a word a few minutes ago. Do you know what word you used that I really noticed? You used the word love. And I don't often hear that word. You hear wellness, you hear care, those types of things. But love, you don't hear that often. And I love that you use the word love. Can you talk about whether,
Sure.
Am I hitting on something, or is it just a word that you threw in there?
You're hitting on something. I think that the other piece to that warmth is authenticity, right? And you've got to be able to share about who you really are, and not necessarily that won't always be what you hear everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
What a cornerstone guiding light my faith is to me.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 Corinthians tells us love is the greatest of these things. And, we hear the word love, we throw that word around a lot, right? Oh, I love ice cream. I love dogs. I love so-and-so. And I think what I've really come to internalize with age and experiences is love looks like a lot of things. It really looks like it looks like grace. It looks like respect. It looks like dedication. It looks like passion for a cause or a mission. So I use love really intentionally at this point in my life and in my career and in my personal life. And I think if you truly approach the leadership, the task, no matter how big or how small or how easy or how difficult, from a place of love, I truly believe that you're destined to be successful. It might not look exactly like the path that you anticipated, but you will be successful, and you'll be able to look back at that and be proud of the way you handled it. Additionally, I think those following you and those, for that matter, that you report to, can always look at that and say, I know that she came at that from the very best place that she could.
Right. I mean, it's a guiding principle for you, your faith and love. And I think that's really, really special and when you're doing that right, everybody around you, whether it's your team, whether it's your clients, they're feeling the effects of that love, respect, and all the ways that you describe that. You talked about authenticity, right? I don't know about you, but this was a process and a journey for me. I always thought maybe it's just being a woman in tech in particular, but I wonder if everybody, it's a process for everybody. And recognizing that I didn't have to be the version that I thought I was supposed to be, but it was, sure, there are, I think, norms that are really important. So if you're really early in career, just kind of looking around and saying, what are the norms for this culture or organization? Sure. But aren't we our best when we are ourselves? And I'm curious if you went through that journey as well in terms of authenticity.
Absolutely. Continuing to go down that journey, right? But I definitely look back at 23-year-old Elizabeth that took a job with Merrill Lynch in 1999, and 47-year-old Elizabeth who's, currently serving with Southern First Bank. And obviously banking and finance in general are very traditionally male-dominated industry. So in 1999, there were a lot of norms and there were a lot of examples about what success might look like in those roles. And I think you're spot on. Norms are important. And if you want to be part of a team, you need to step back and, take notice and then determine whether that's something that you can conform with the norms. You can still bring yourself to that process. But as you said, I didn't know that at 23.
Right.
That is an ongoing learning. I had a colleague that said to me several years ago, and he's probably 10 years my senior, and he said, one thing I've learned for sure, you have to do it your way. If you try to do it someone else's way, everybody will see through it and you won't be successful. And internalizing that takes some practice. But I think where it started, the day he said that, I thought he's absolutely right. If this isn't the right path, or this isn't the right opportunity, then I'll figure that out.
Yeah.
But I need to approach it authentically and honestly and with love, and then go from there. And I think the willingness to accept that, that potential failure or, path change is part of that. And that just comes with time.
So putting all this together, so what we're not saying is, because one thing I hear people say a lot is like, well, that's just who I am and take it or leave it. And that's all well and good. But you always have to be thinking about your impact on others as well. So if you're going to be intentional about your leadership, you're leading from an authentic place, but you're also noticing the things that you do and say and how they impact others so that you can turn that radio dial to get the best outcome, right? And then being the same everywhere you go, right? That's what I see about you too, whether you're giving a big presentation or whether you're engaging with all levels of people at a networking event. I just thought of this story as you were talking. When I was at Microsoft, I was asked to lead this big event. I was the MC of like a several hundred person leadership event. It was like so exciting. And one of the things that was, I guess, supposed to be a benefit was I was going to meet the whole leader of the business outside in the hallway, get a chance to introduce myself, and then I was going to introduce him on stage. And he must have been in a bad mood or something because I'd never met him before. I go out in the hallway and he was just like, okay, not even looking me in the eye, kind of mean actually. And I was so off put. And I'm thinking, oh man, he must be having a bad day. Then 5 minutes later, I introduce him on the stage. And you should have seen him go, hey, everybody, great to see you. And he just turned it on. And in that moment, I thought, well, what's the real you? I think I just saw the real you. And from that point on, I could never respect that leader, right? So it's like being the same. I don't know why I'm telling that story other than something you said got me to spark, being very, like we have to remember as leaders, we're always on. People are always either being encouraged by it. He had an opportunity to encourage, or they're being discouraged, right? Yeah. So
I think, and you just said it so well, he can never regain his, that level of, you'll never forget. I shouldn't say never. Perhaps if you had an opportunity to interact with him at some other level, there would be an explanation. But I think I tell my children all the time, whether we like it or not, optics do matter. That doesn't mean that you need to not be true to yourself or your values, your beliefs. But we are always leading. And I think it's all the more reason that we lead from a place of authenticity, behave in a way that is authentic to who we are, because the stage, you never know what the stage is, and he just, dismissed you as someone who was introducing him and impacted the way you'll feel about him. Yeah, the way you feel about him still today. So I do think the importance of recognizing that you're leading and recognizing that how you make people feel is crucial to building followership and in having people listen when you speak, and perhaps change the way they feel to align with the way you feel if you're selling something or you're passionate about a topic. But at the very least, I want anybody who interacts with me to walk away feeling like they got the very best of me. They know, if you spend 5 minutes with somebody, you're not going to know them really well, but that they, if they talk to you about it, you'd be like, yeah, that's my friend Elizabeth. I can hear her saying that, or see her handling it. You sort of
know it when you see it. So everybody, I think authenticity is a big topic in the corporate world. Everybody wants to be authentic, but they're like, how do I do that, right? What I'm hearing you is you're very clear on your values and your guiding principles. They start and probably end with your faith and your belief system and how to treat people. And so you have to be very clear on that, and then you have to be really intentional about the way you want to show up. And that's the key to and
that's the how.
That's the how. That's the how. Well, we've sort of touched around the edges around communicating effectively, which is another one of your superpowers, I would say. What advice would you have for leaders as they try to hone the art of communicating effectively? And that's a big topic, right? We can go in a lot of directions.
I think, communication is another one that is you're ever evolving, right? You can always be a more effective communicator. Recognizing the importance, you starting there, and I am a very direct communicator. And I think that's hard sometimes. And I really, even today, I hold myself accountable. I tell the young people that work for me sometimes, we would all like to hide behind email and send a message that says, oh, I can't do this right now, or I'm so sorry, but, I can't underwrite your loan, think of me next time. That would be easy to hide behind a screen, but it is an effective communication. That person deserves for you to pick up the phone and have the hard conversation and explain the why and possibly offer some possibilities that could change the answer in the future, right? And it's the same conversation I would have with my children when they have to have hard conversations, or if I need to have a hard conversation with a teacher. There's always an easy way out. I don't find that to be the most effective mode of communication. So I really value direct, transparent communication, even, and perhaps more importantly, when it's a hard topic. The how there, I am intentional about my words. Words are important. They mean lots of different things. I like words, so that helps. Especially when I write, you have a lot more. You have a lot more opportunity to really be crisp about what you're conveying. And I'll find that I'll replace one word a couple of times, and then I'll know that's the word I needed there. But you can be intentional. One thing, with age, slow down. Listen more. That was a really hard thing as a young person. I like to talk. I talk to process. I like to think that I have something to add. But you can really erode your credibility by speaking when you don't know what you're talking about.
Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I have a good story about that. But, I think the value in being quiet and listening, and then listening to understand, so that when you respond, perhaps you have something to offer. And I tell people too all the time, it's okay to say, I don't know, or I hadn't thought about that. And how about I reserve the right to change my mind? I thought I believed this, but after hearing you explain it that way, I feel differently. So I think those are all important, aspects of communicating.
I think this direct communication will help a lot of people. In my coaching practice, I find that there's two sides of the spectrum around communication. Most people that I work with struggle with giving constructive feedback because they lean more to being natural encouragers. They don't, they want to sort of let the little things go. I mean, after all, who cares? It's just a small thing, or it's like you say, it's easier. And to those people, what I'm picking up from you is the reason why you do it is because it's kind to the other person. Directness is clarity. Directness is kindness. And I think a lot of people on listening right now need to hear that, right? Because it's hard to do, but it's kind when it comes from that place. On the other side of the spectrum, there's people who their directness comes across kind of aggressive. I don't know. I don't know whether they're missing that second part of what you said, which is like we owe it to them, right? Any guidance that you can give to the person that is just like, hey, I say it like it is.
Yeah, it's. I think we tout that, right? Oh, I tell it like it is. That's great. Have you applied the lens of love? How does that make the receiver feel? I truly believe that you can communicate almost anything from a place of love or a place of harm. So feedback's hard, and constructive feedback is hard. It takes effort from the giver. And I think I said to you previously, I had a mentor years ago that said, when I stop giving you feedback, you can assume that I have decided that you're as good as you'll be. There's nothing left to tell you. Wow. And I think that really helped hone my leadership style as it pertained to coaching, because that's so true, right? As soon as I quit sharing with my children how I think they could be more successful, that would demonstrate that I think they've got nothing left to learn, or that they aren't capable. And I think that's if you take that lens in terms of giving constructive feedback, then we do from a place of love. And sometimes it looks like, we've been at this together trying to help you be successful in this role for a year. And it hasn't worked. And I think at this point, the thing that I can do best for you is help you look for something that is a better fit. That's a hard conversation.
That's a hard conversation. Well, I mean,
but that's very different than you're fired.
To me, that is groundbreaking. And I wish I would have heard that 15 years ago when I personally struggled with this, because I was an avoider. My husband might say sometimes I'm still an avoider on tough conversations. But the piece that says, when we don't give that piece of feedback, we've basically decided that person's capped out, or that person has gone as far as they can go. Yep. Wow, if I would have heard that 15 years ago, that would have reframed for me that entire, or even clear as kind, like that would have reframed the entire conversation for me. So
it's empowered me in that regard. And I think too, often you asked how do we prevent being hurtful, or the opposite effect, and really I think being intentional about how and when, and thinking about the why. Are we just enjoying controlling this process, or do we really recognize that that we care enough about this person as an individual to give them credible feedback?
I want to go back to how you talked about not saying something sometimes, because if you say something, you can erode your credibility. Do you fill that with questions instead? So seek to understand, I think, is how you phrased it.
Yeah. 1,000%. I think that, as a young professional, we have a need to make sure everyone sees that we're in the room. I would assume that most of us who are seeking to climb and grow, we need to be seen. We want to be validated. We want credit for showing up or being there. And I learned early on that speaking up about something where you might not be well versed isn't a great way. You're better off to be there. Someone will see you, but then also, whatever your question is, don't be scared to answer it, right? Or to ask it. It's so cliche, that there's no dumb question. But what I have really found is that, and I always say, keep it simple, stupid. Let's just assume that, I know nothing about whatever the topic is at hand. Once I've really listened with ears to understand, and if I still have a question, then I'll just raise my hand and say, I apologize if everyone else in the room already knows the answer to this. Can you help me understand how these two things tie together? Or what did I miss here? I don't understand how this next step fits, what we just talked about. And I honestly cannot think of an example where everybody else is like, oh yeah, everybody gets that but you. Even if it's only one or two people that were like, yeah, I had that same question, because I do think we're more alike than we are different. So if my brain didn't connect all the dots, it's likely that someone else's didn't also. And I also think that provides, and sometimes I'm asking a question that was clear and perhaps the speaker wanted to gloss over.
There's a reason why you're asking that question. It's a senior leader thing too. I'm wondering, I think that the more senior we go, sometimes it's more intimidating to ask that question, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe not so much with direct reports and things, but for sure when we're in a room of what we consider our peers or something, mm-hmm. we're like, I'm supposed to be the expert in this. I'm like a senior leader. I'm not supposed to have questions. Actually, the opposite is true. The more senior you get, the more general you are. It's not like when you're early in your career and you lean on your expertise. And I can totally picture when you say that, like people are probably like, oh, thank God, thank God she asked that question because I had the same one, right? So I think that's a good reminder, right?
Well, and to your point about, empowering everyone else to ask questions. If they say, well, if Elizabeth had a question, then, then it's okay for me to ask a question. And again, that just feeds that it's authentic. If I have a question, I have a question.
Amazing.
You have to have the confidence to ask.
Okay. So the communication, just some recaps, the direct communication, it's, not being afraid to ask questions and to really dig in with the team. Curiosity. Yeah. I think I'm on this new kick. I had an epiphany a couple months ago that the more experience we get in our careers, if we don't watch out for it, our curiosity goes in the opposite direction because our brain makes all these shortcuts. And so how do we stay curious? How do you stay curious, even though you've probably seen the scenario so many different times? And how do you stay curious?
I have friends like you that remind me. And you laugh, but steel sharpens steel. And, months ago when we were, you were talking with me about my own professional journey, one of the things we talked about was when we are really good at something, we tend to think, I've done this 1,000 times, I've got this. And we really need to slow down and be intentional about our thought process and check to make sure, is this really what I think it is? And oh, by the way, how could I do that differently? Or how could that look differently? How can I make this new team member feel more connected, more empowered, more engaged than I did before? Because if we are all learning and growing, which I think we acknowledge we are, then you need to utilize those new skills. And curiosity is the key. If you push yourself to be curious about the how and the why, and then you communicate it, I think that creates this wonderful cycle where success is the result or the outcome.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll tell you that my son Luca was just an intern at Southern First Bank, and I was so amazed. He had this experience where the CEO and the executive team, at the end of his internship, they wanted him to present back to them on his experience, but what was one thing that he thinks that we could improve upon at the bank, right?
Oh, good.
And not only did that create such a great impression for him, where he's like, I can't believe they want to hear from me. When he told me what his insight was, I thought to myself, the CEO of the bank is absolutely going to want to hear that because he doesn't have that lens.
Yep.
And so kudos to the culture of Southern First. It feels like that kind of instills that curiosity all the way from you and all the way at the top. So
absolutely. And I talked to the entire staff about curiosity and how critical that is to us meeting our clients' needs, which is, me choosing Southern First was not by happenstance. It was very clear to me. I stepped back, 30,000 foot view. I'm going to build this career for another 15 or 20 years. Which institution feels like the right fit for me and my family and what I want to do and the way I see myself and what I think I have to bring to the table? And Southern First was the obvious answer for that reason.
I was going to ask you because not that I know the banking world too well, but I would imagine when you left Wells Fargo to go to these smaller regional banks, there were probably some people, much like when I left Microsoft at the pinnacle of my career, what is she doing? Why is she blazing this totally different path, right? I'm seeing you nod. Okay, good. So what was that about? Was that about wanting to take a different path for you? And how do you sort of tamp down that, the well-worn path? Because if you would have stayed at Wells, I'm sure your rapid ascent there would have continued, right?
Well, I guess,
I'm just going to call
one will
it.
never know, but I appreciate the faith. And, it's a really great, and I spent a lot of time in that vein of thinking. 16 years at Wells, I thought I had a 5, 10, and year plan, not to mention retirement. I thought it was clear. I love the company. I say often it raised me. I got married there. I had 3 children there. I learned so much. And what a great company. And a big, international stage. And I joined a regional bank between, I left Wells in 2019 and I did a 5-year stint at F&B before moving on to Southern First. And really the decision to make a change centered around my being true to myself, that honing in on that authenticity. If anything was missing for me professionally, I always thought I would do something more entrepreneurial. And this bank came to me and said, we want to come to market and we want to hire you to bring us to the state of South Carolina. Come build what works in your market under our umbrella. So their timing and their message was correct. And I'm really so glad I did that. I learned so much. We built an amazing team and got that company off the ground in the midst of COVID. And really proud of meeting those goals and leaving it much better, if I do say so myself, than we found it. And then, as happens in life, you still look up and say, is this it? Is this the end of the road? And I had a bank that's headquartered here in the state of South Carolina. The CEO and founder are still with the institution, and they eat, breathe, and sleep the state of South Carolina and our business community and our families and our churches and our nonprofits. And that really resonated with me, learning about how a bank is integral to their local community, and having a piece of that, a seat at that table, was exciting and is exciting.
So in just a few short years, you pivot from the international stage at Wells Fargo to aligning with your personal values and pouring into your local community, right? And stoking a little bit more of your entrepreneurial bent.
Yes.
But in a few short years, and now you're the chair-elect for the Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce, which I feel like is a huge kudos to you, because that is not something you apply for or lobby for. That's something that you're asked to do based on your demonstrated leadership in the community, right? Yep. So can you hone in on something, a leadership principle or something that, as you look back, that said, these are the things, or these are the way I led that enabled me to have this kind of impact and success with others?
I'm going to steal from a couple of your previous guests. And by the way, I love the episodes. I've really just enjoyed them all. But a couple of them, all of them said something that resonated. But my friend Mike Carter said, you got to have grit. And you do. There's no replacement for hard work. I always tell the boys all the time, there's no get rich quick and nothing's free. So you got to work hard. And I think I do that. And Maureen talked about pushing the carts up and down the hall herself. You have to demonstrate that you can lead by example. You've got to roll up your sleeves and get in there and do the work. And I think, both of those things, have been important and have been, leadership qualities that I've endeavored to, make part of my style. And then I think people do trust authenticity, and they trust real conversations, and they trust vulnerability, right? And I haven't been scared to share the ups and the downs and what was perhaps difficult or scary. But also, I think where the warmth comes in is I love to celebrate a victory. I mean, I like to win. Don't make any mistake about that. And but you got to celebrate those things, and you really have to be proud when you're leading others. You have to really be able to celebrate their victories with them. And I think at the heart of the matter, it just comes back to holding myself accountable to be the person that I am, that I can be proud of, and working hard and getting in there and being willing to get your hands dirty in the process. And
that working hard, the raising the hand thing, like, I think it's the best compliment when you hear your friends and coworkers repeat back things you said. And I actually wrote down something you said, and that I quote you all the time. You said, doing the bare minimum will earn you just that.
Yep. It's the truth.
So true, right?
You do. And, I've talked for years, and the women that have worked with me, I think they'll be like nodding their head. You got to raise your hand. I had a female mentor out of Manhattan who had a huge territory, and I was asking her after baby number 3 about getting my MBA. And Lucia said, I wouldn't spend your energy there. She didn't have any children. She said, what I got out of MBA school, you're getting at home, managing a home and a professional career and 3 young children and a marriage. Instead, use that energy to raise your hand inside. Raise your hand for the next project. Raise your hand when we need help. Raise your hand when we're looking for a voice. And especially as women, I think we are tentative about raising our hand if we're not sure that, if we don't think we have all the answers. And I have news, we're never going to have all the answers. So take a deep breath, consider your words, raise your hand. That would be I wouldn't say that it's the single guiding principle of my leadership style, but just for me as a team member and a participant, raising your hand is so important. And it is true. What you get into it is what you will get out of it, or what you put into it is what you will get out of it.
It's so good. I mean, raising your hand to take on that big project that's important to your CEO, or raising your hand because you want to learn more about the local community and going and visiting with the chamber, the prisons, and understanding the economic environment, understanding transportation. You do all those things because you're authentically curious. It's not, not some, kind of crazy motive. And then all of a sudden you've collected all these experiences and someone turns around and says, hey, Elizabeth, you're the next chairman of the board because you have these broad experiences and you have an opinion and a point of view that's going to help lead ourselves. I also think you're a phenomenal connector, right? Yeah. Just being, and I think that comes from your love of people, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I told you, my strength finders connectivity is like the top. I've often said, like, that's such a soft skill. Maybe I should have gone to law school or medical school, something definitive. But I do think I think about how much I appreciate when someone takes the time to connect with me or to create a connection for me. Or thinking about our friendship, when I met you, I was like, wow, this girl's badass, right? Mm-hmm. She's a Microsoft executive. She's smart. She's dynamic. And I reached out and you took the time to connect, and we've built, now at this point, we've got years of friendship. And I think that connectivity is the real glue. And some of us might connect with on a much bigger stage or with a lot more people, but we can all bring our own level of connectivity, to our careers and our families, and
absolutely. And that's what
the communities we serve.
I often think and reflect on my career. I'm not sure that I was ever usually the big person with the big ideas, but I can take two things. I'm like, this together, go make that happen, right? It's the connections that create value. Well, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom. I do ask every guest a final question. So a final question for you. If you could wrap up with sharing just one piece of advice about leadership, what would that be?
Well, I'm glad I shared so many others earlier because one is hard. I was listening to some of your earlier guests and thinking, one is really hard. But there was as I was, spending some quiet time preparing for this and thinking about, what I would share, I think leading from a place of love, and that feels a little squishy and that's dangerous territory for a female leader. But I would connect back to, when we first started this conversation, and I think the word love looks like a lot of different things, but it looks like hard work. It looks like respect. It looks like dedication. It looks like grit. It looks like putting others' interest ahead of our own. And I really believe if you lead from that place, the results and the outcomes will speak for themselves. And that doesn't mean they're not failures along the way, right? And you really have to look back at the times of challenge and opportunity, or where it didn't go the way I thought it would, and the importance of taking a breath and working through that with love and with grace, and coming out on the other side just double down, empowered and passionate about what the next step is. So
I 100% agree with you. I think that is so well said. Love big, put others first. And when you do that, these successes, they just tend to show up. It's not why you do them, but they just kind of follow you, right?
It's a beautiful outcome.
It is a beautiful outcome. Well, we're so lucky that we get all of your energy now in the Charleston or Southeast market. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Join us every Tuesday for insider access to executive leadership.